I hope everyone is well as usual, that life is starting to ease back a little bit, little by little, and everyone's sort of looking forward and unsure in terms of what's going to happen next, right? So, so today's topic is about handling feedback, and I was actually going to cover this one sometime next week, but a couple of things happened, and I thought, why not use that opportunity to discuss feedback and what happens when we all receive and have to give feedback. So to start with, what is feedback really? What is feedback to you? So if you're watching live, give me a high five or a heads up, or quick comment to know that you're here. And if you're watching this later, then still share your feedback anyways. So feedback in general, especially in a workplace, or especially in a hotel, is connected to how well we perform the task, right? And it's also used for as a foundation to understand how and where to make improvements, right? Now, I know in our hotels we do a lot of things, like we collect guest feedback and we put it into our CRM systems or PMS systems that we have, and we use that to understand the guest a little better, and we use that information to be able to serve them better, cater to their likes and dislikes better, and so on, right? But what about feedback between ourselves, between our teams, between peers, or between people who work in the same team, and so on? What about that kind of feedback? Now, statistics show that majority of the times, as an organization, as a hotel, we're more concerned about feedback from our guests as compared to feedback from within our teams. Now, I know HR teams have evolved to levels where there are things like the 360-degree feedback system and the feedback of between bosses and teams when they're looking at KRAs and all of that. But we're not talking about that feedback specifically, not the one that the HR system does, but more in terms of, so we're talking about feedback really between people, between the people who work together, between superiors and their teams, between peers or people working within the same department. And it's a really essential feature to be able to move forward and achieve your required targets or your set goals. Okay, so different kinds of feedback. So typically in a hotel system, typically you would have guests giving feedback, and generally the people acting on it, responding to it, would be the hotel's manager or the division managers, so front office or food and beverage and so on. Or you would have managers giving feedback to their teams in terms of how well they've performed or how badly they performed or whatever. And from, again, what statistics show is that top-down feedback in general is more lopsided towards negative feedback, and there's much less of positive feedback that goes top-down. Okay, so we understand that's an essential, that managers need to keep their teams motivated by sharing more positive feedback to the teams and so on, and also feedback within the peers. So you and your team, whoever works with you, etc., how do you exchange feedback? Now, I want to focus a little more on that part in terms of how we all exchange feedback between our colleagues, because that's really essential to really move forward as a team. Okay, so the key features for handling that feedback is it definitely needs to be, it needs to be there in the first place. So let's say that you've got 3 colleagues in your team, you and 3 people who work together in one department, and you all need to perform a certain job to the utmost efficiency. the four of you need to be giving each other feedback constantly to be able to take things forward. Okay. Now that constant also needs to be in terms of, timely. It has to be timely, which means you have to exchange that feedback at the right time. You need to be able to exchange that feedback for the purpose of moving forward. And if one of the team members is not on the right track from the point of meeting that goal or target, then how do you give the feedback at that stage as well? Okay, so the essentials really about exchanging feedback between your teams: timely, definitely constant in terms of where you are heading, and even if it's not heading in the right direction, it needs to be given. It needs to be communicated to the individual who's responsible for that. Give me your feedback on when have you received feedback from your superiors before, or from your team members when you've been assigned a task in terms of have you been given some feedback in the past? Give me an indication. So since I can't hear you, you're going to type a message and comment so I can read that and reciprocate. Okay, I'm assuming you have. Yeah. I'm assuming the comments are going to come slowly, and I'm assuming that you have received some feedback. In general, when have you received more feedback? In general, have you received more feedback when you performed a job well, or have you received more feedback when it's not gone too well? Let me make an assumption. And again, statistical assumptions is that there's usually more feedback exchange when things have gone wrong, and less feedback exchange when things have gone well. Okay, so that's one of the key things, one of the key aspects of giving feedback, that it should also be given specifically at the time when things go well. So when a guest compliments the hotel and guest has given a great review on TripAdvisor, it's very important for that to be shared with the team so that they are motivated. Even if it's your own colleagues, if someone has done things well, then it's important to let them know that they've done something really well. Yeah. So a lot of times we forget to give feedback to our team members, right? I don't know about you, but usually when I've been working and we've been having, when I was working in a team and we had a project to manage together, we would sort of look up to one person to lead us rather than try and give each other that support and feedback to keep going. Okay. So if we change that style of working and say, okay, we're 4 people in a team and we're going to have to complete a task or achieve a goal, what can we do to give feedback to each other and support each other to keep moving forward? Okay. So that's the other part. Another key thing about feedback is how we communicate that feedback. So there are 2 levels that feedback should be communicated on. Okay, so let's say that the feedback is positive. Okay, your colleague or your junior or your subordinate in your team or whoever it is has done something really well. Okay, and you want to share that positive feedback. And if you don't want to share it, you should start sharing it. Okay, even if you haven't done it in the past, do it now, because it's very, very essential, especially given how the times are and people coming back into the new normal. Sensitivities are going to be high, so the positive feedback must be shared. Okay, so how do you share positive feedback? Okay, let's say that your colleague or your chef, or let's take an example that the chef, fantastic dishes, guests are really happy with the food. Okay, the positive feedback that needs to go to the chef should be more focused about the person and not about his job. So usually we'll say, oh, chef, fantastic job, chef, or fantastic cooking, chef, right? So over there, we tend to address the skill, we tend to address the behavior, we tend to address the job. Now, what we want to say instead is, chef, you are a fantastic chef. And that changes the dynamics of the positive feedback completely for that human being, for the individual. Okay? So whenever we're sharing positive feedback, it's essential to focus that feedback on the person. So rather than saying fantastic cookery, we want to say amazing, you are an amazing chef. Okay? Not you've done an amazing job. And try this out in your home environment. If you're still in lockdown and there's some time for you to go back to work, try this out, okay? With your children, with your family, whoever it is. Try this out, that when they've done something really well, give the feedback at the personal level, okay? Second one, the second flip side is the negative feedback. So when there's negative feedback or things have gone wrong, I don't like to actually use the word negative so much, but I like to say, okay, when things have gone wrong, which they do, things go wrong, how do you share feedback for the purpose of improvement? Okay, so when you're talking about improvement, when things have gone wrong, that's when you want to focus on the skill or the task. So again, taking a chef's example, if there's been a complaint from the guest, you want to focus on sharing how that could have been better. So you don't want to say to the chef that you're a lousy chef, okay? But you want to say that, okay, this dish was not appreciated and it could be made better. So you're taking the focus away from the person, okay, and onto the object or onto the skill, that the dish could have been made better or the dish could have been cooked differently, okay? So these are two essentials of giving feedback. So whenever it's positive, always compliment the person, that it's about him, about her, okay? And if there's a problem or if the feedback's negative, then look for how you can focus on improving the result rather than focusing on commenting on the person. Because in general, people are doing their best they can, okay? That's what I believe. That's one of my beliefs about excellence, that people are doing the best they can. And the more they are encouraged and the more they're appreciated, the better they perform. So that's what you want to focus on. So that's about giving feedback. Now, what about receiving feedback? I think it's very important that we learn to receive feedback as well. Okay. So let's say that you've done a great job. You've done something amazing and the results have been very, very positive. Your guests are really happy, or you hit the revenue target, or whatever it is that you have worked towards. I think it's important to be able to receive that feedback. So this is what I would do if I was in that place and I've done this really well, and my boss has not acknowledged or complimented me on that job, then I would possibly want to nicely say that I believe I've done this really well, and I hope that you think I've done a great job too. Okay, and usually there will be a positive response, because that individual will possibly realize that, oh yeah, this guy has done a great job or this girl has done a great job, and I should have complimented them earlier. Okay, so that's about receiving feedback. It's not asking or it's not begging, it's just acknowledging that you believe you've done a great job, you believe you've delivered really good results, and you want that acknowledgement from somebody else as well, because that keeps you on track, that keeps you motivated. Yeah. So, and a lot of times self-motivation can be sufficient, but in a hotel environment, especially when there are so many different people dynamics, it's really essential to be able to continuously feed people back into, how well they're doing and how much better they can do. So that's about receiving. And now the critical one is about handling feedback, handling negative feedback. Now, let's first acknowledge that none of us are perfect, okay? None of us are perfect. We're human beings. We all make mistakes at some point or the other. And in a hotel environment, Murphy's Law is the one that plays out most of the time. How many of us have had issues in hotels when we've had a VIP guest? How many of us have had, critical things going wrong just at the time when you want it to be perfect in your hotel. And trust me, this has happened to almost every event that I have, worked with in a hotel. And I'm not saying it was my fault, but I'm just saying that it happens. No matter how much we prepare, there are things that can go wrong. And at times like that, there are chances when we will receive negative feedback. It could be because of our mistake as an individual, or it could be because of the mistake of the team, or it could be some lack of observation, or it could be some slip up somewhere. The reasons of things going wrong could be many. But the fact is that there will be times when we receive negative feedback. So how do we handle that? Okay, because at that time, if I link it back to our previous live that we did on self-confidence, it does affect an individual's self-confidence. Yeah, we're not gods, we're human beings. So it does affect us. So how do we handle that negative feedback? First step for me is I was subject to some feedback recently, and I didn't like it, And the reason I didn't like it, I realized, is that firstly, the timing of that feedback was completely wrong, because I analyzed it later. So the feedback came to me on a WhatsApp message at 6 a.m. and I had barely woken up and the phone beeped. So usually nobody texts me at that hour. But when I looked at my phone, I'm like, okay, somebody's messaging. I assume something was wrong, or someone in the family was sick, or something happened. So I looked at the phone, and there was this whole feedback about sharing information on what that individual thought was wrong. And it just blew my mind. I was like, oh my God, I've barely woken up and I've got all of this. It felt like an onslaught. It felt like an attack to me. It wasn't an attack, but to me, it felt like that. And I couldn't handle it. I didn't like it. So I spent the next hour, fuming over the whole thing and saying, what the hell, how is this that this individual is, not sensitive enough to the fact that it's 6 a.m. and I'm still asleep and whatever, right? So all of that crazy dialogue started playing in my head, and you know how you experience negative feedback, so I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Okay, but the critical thing is, how do you handle it? Yeah, most of the time when we receive negative feedback, we try to react, we try to justify. Okay, so if in normal circumstances I would have possibly just responded with a reactive message saying, that's your opinion and that's not about me, and I would have justified it saying it's that individual's opinion, but it's not something wrong with me, or that I didn't ask for that feedback, so I don't know why you're giving me your opinion, or something like that. We usually tend to get on the defensive when we receive negative feedback because it feels like personal. So I let it be. I just said, okay, it's anyway too early in the morning. I don't want to get into any kind of a reactive conversation with this person. So I let it be. And then I came back to it about an hour later. And that's when I replied to them. Okay. And my reply was not defensive. I was not trying to defend myself, or I was not trying to explain myself. I was just trying to say that next time it'll be different, or next time I'll do it better, or whatever, and I let it be at that. So there are two ways that you can actually handle feedback. Is when it's positive, please lap it up. Okay, first of all, okay, I should have addressed the positive side earlier. So when we receive positive feedback, lap it up. Okay, be dog-like, be like a dog that just laps up things that he loves, because positive feedback is scarce. Okay, so when you do get it, just imagine that it's not just positive feedback, it's like the most amazing thing that you've received. Okay, because that boosts up your own self-confidence. Okay, so even if it's about the smallest of jobs, even if it's the smallest of the compliments that you get, saying some guest thinks that, oh, you serve them really well, or whatever it is, the feedback that you got, lap it up, and in your mind just expand it and say, oh my God, this is the best feedback I've ever had. Yeah, so that's for positive in terms of handling. And handling the negative one is just remember that do not react. Okay, you don't want to react to negative feedback by defending yourself, because that tends to get into a bigger argument, because that person has another point of view, you have another point of view, and so on. Okay, try and let it be for some time, whatever that time is for you, whether it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever. Calm yourself down and then focus on what is the message really saying. Is the feedback really towards improvement? Is the feedback, most likely when somebody's giving you some kind of a feedback, it is usually with the intention of an improvement, usually. Unless the person's a real idiot who is just trying to bring you down, which is a different story altogether. We will not address that in today's section. We will address that separately. But it is really about being able to handle the negative feedback that you get, or being able to handle stuff when you're not ready for it. Okay, so focus on not reacting in the first place. Okay, and not defending what you've done or not trying to justify it. So even if you've been 100% right and the individual who's giving the feedback has a negative opinion on it, it's fine. Don't justify it at that point in time. Don't react. Okay, but just cool yourself and then go back and focus on what was the intention. What do you think the intention was behind that feedback? And later understand or explain your position. Okay, so those are my tips on this, on feedback, on and sharing feedback. Okay, and you as an individual as well, you must make it a point to compliment and give feedback where it is positive. So whether it's in your workplace or whether it's in your family or wherever it is, it's important to communicate it. It's important to verbalize it. Okay, so quickly recapping, feedback, when it is positive, it should always be personal, which means that you are amazing. Okay, even if they've done a great job, it's they are amazing. Okay, when there's a problem or the feedback is negative, then focus on how that particular result can be improved. Okay, not how the person can be improved, but how that result can be improved, how that particular function can be improved, how the particular process can be improved, and so on. Right? And when the situation is negative or when the feedback is negative, never ever ever get down to calling the person an idiot or a stupid person or whatever it is that we tend to say, even sometimes in our minds, and then without even realizing it comes out of our mouths. So just remember that it's necessary to focus on the result that can be improved when the feedback is negative. Okay, and when it comes to handling feedback for yourself, when it's positive, lap it up, just assume that it's the best thing that's ever happened to you. Just expand that whole feeling in your mind and just really really go with it, because that's what keeps people motivated to perform better. Yeah, and if the feedback that you're receiving is negative, just remember to not react at that point and not justify your position at that point, because that tends to lead to more arguments. Okay, and in situations of the negative feedback, take space out of that situation, figure out what was the intention behind that negative feedback. Usually the intention is positive and it's for the purpose of improvement. So how can you use that without letting it affect you as a person? Okay, because you know that you performed well in the job. There are times slip-ups happen. So okay, so just remember to focus on these things. And when you want to practice giving feedback, your family is the best place to practice it. Right now, everybody's at home with their families. It might just do well to sort of, seal the bonds a bit more or improve the bonds that we already have with our families. So those are my tips on feedback. And as always, I'm sharing some information with you in the message along with this video. So we're planning to conduct an entire session on feedback only, which obviously will cover a lot more detail and a lot more techniques and a lot more background, a lot more situations, and how to handle each of these situations. So register your interest in the Google form given above. and we will keep you posted on the upcoming sessions that are going to happen, which will be taken on a webinar or a live Zoom format that you can be a part of. And these are the things that you can gear yourself up with when you go back into the workspace, because it's important right now. The reason being is people's sensitivities are very, very high right now. People are really, really sensitive. People are anxious. Everyone is everyone does, nobody knows how they are going to react into that new situation, right? So even though we read about it, even though we're getting news about it, even though your hotel and company and team may be communicating with you, the fact is when you're out there, you don't know what you're going to experience, or you don't know how you're going to feel at that time. And the same thing's going to be happening with your guests, same thing's going to be happening with your boss, same thing's going to be happening with your team. So just keep it, take these tools on while you can, because you have the space now to take them and utilize them, and prepare yourself before you go back to work. Okay, so register your interest, and we will keep you posted on the upcoming sessions for sometime next week. And our attempt is to keep these really, really focused on specific topics that we know are challenges for hoteliers. And this is based on feedback that they've given us over the last 3 years of trainings that we've run for them. So we want to keep this a little more crisp and a little more specific to what you guys will need. And if there's anything else, then of course, please feel free to send us a message on the Hotelier Excellence page. And if there's anything that you have to share now, it would be great to see a comment. And whatever you have a question, I'm happy to answer it. We have a few more minutes before we sign out. So that's where we are. And guys, if you have commented and I haven't replied, then it's possibly because it's not come through over here. Okay, it's not come through and I can't see the comment. So if I haven't, then excuse me for that, but I will be able to reply to you at least through a message. Yeah, I'm gonna check. I'm gonna wait for a few more minutes and check if the comments come through. If not, then send me a message on the Hotelier Excellence page and I will revert. And obviously register your interest on the Google form that I've put out, because the more feedback we receive from you guys, the more we know what is going to help you. Okay, good. So awesome. So I don't see any comments coming in, but guys, thank you for being there. And if you're watching this later, like I said, please feel free to comment and there will be a reply for sure. All right. So wherever you are in the world, have a good evening, good afternoon, and we will see you on the next one and look forward to your feedback. Bye.